All right, welcome back, everybody. Today I have another really special guest on, and this will be a bit of a different kind of conversation here. We're going to dive into the crazy world of NFTs and copyright and a ton of really interesting things that are going on at this intersection. And so I want to welcome 4156 to the program. I was going to introduce you as Punk 4156, but I know some things have changed over the last couple of weeks that we can certainly dive into. But why don't we start off with just a quick intro to yourself and kind of your journey into crypto?
Yeah, sure, and thank you for the introduction. I'm an anon for now, operating as 4156. I've been in the crypto space since about 2013, when I was working in tech, kind of in a creative field within tech, and discovered Bitcoin. Like many others, kind of read the Satoshi white paper and went down the rabbit hole. Remember having a couple of very distinct moments where when I finally grokked the Bitcoin white paper, just kind of like, standing up and realizing it was going to change the world. Continued to operate in the space as a function of both, I guess, kind of buying crypto early on and just being very, very interested in what it was going to do, and went full-time crypto pretty early on. Kind of discovered Ethereum early on as well, and I think that was another kind of aha moment for me in the space when I understood this, the idea of tokenization and what the proliferation of tokens would mean. And then I would say probably my third aha moment was just over a year ago. I had originally claimed some CryptoPunks without really thinking too much about them, but then started thinking more deeply about non-fungible tokens. That most of the objects in the world can be represented as non-fungible rather than fungible, and what these tokens would mean for culture, and that ultimately it would be culture that would take crypto mainstream rather than the financial applications that we'd all been used to. So I kind of developed a pretty deep thesis, I would say, on non-fungible tokens, and then just started operating primarily in the NFT subsector of the Ethereum economy.
Yeah, that's a great place for us to jump in. You mentioned kind of claiming your first CryptoPunk or CryptoPunks. Maybe talk us through a little bit of what that experience was like. I think you mentioned that was earlier this year, maybe around February. So what that experience was like claiming these punks, and what really attracted you to CryptoPunks initially?
Yeah, sure. So the punks were actually claimed in 2017, I believe. At the time, that was just it seemed like an experiment that someone had released. Turned out Larva Labs had released onto Ethereum. They were released for free. At the time, there was no MetaMask. There weren't sophisticated wallets. You had to be pretty deep down the rabbit hole already to have the infrastructure ready to kind of claim these. Was kind of looking at them with some friends, and we messed around and kind of claimed, I don't know, it was like a handful each, 5 or 6, and then really just forgot about them for quite a long time. And again, it was just about a year ago when I started to really think a lot more about these non-fungible tokens that I thought, well, I still have some of these punks. Let me take a look at them. And of course, the prices had started to increase, and as tends to happen, I think, prices sometimes kind of initiate a bit of a mental feedback loop as well, where you start thinking about why is this happening? What does it mean? And then as I developed more of a thesis and had more conviction around what they could potentially mean, I started to buy a lot of them, including Punk 4156, which I purchased. I believe it was a 625 or 650 ETH that I paid, which I'm not sure if it was the first, but it was certainly one of the first $1 million CryptoPunk sales at the time. So, I guess I had obviously kind of acquired a lot of conviction fairly quickly that these were going to be important digital objects.
And what was as you were starting to put this thesis together, and you mentioned you started to get more conviction around them being, let's say, an integral, at least an early iteration of what these digital objects could be and the value associated with those. What was that thesis, right? And why do you think that something like CryptoPunks has really taken off? And certainly, yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily call it, let's say, mainstream adoption, but within, let's say, the crypto world, certainly pretty much everyone at this point has heard of CryptoPunks. So what is it about them themselves that you think, and we can obviously dovetail this into some other projects that you're working on, what is it about them that really, attracted you and why you thought these could accrue value over the long term?
I think initially it was just an intuition. I think the idea that people were using them as their Twitter PFPs, that people were starting to kind of think about digital identity more deeply, and to think about kind of ownership around that identity. That the punk is a kind of a digital original, and a kind of claim on OG-ness in the context of the Ethereum economy. So I think that was the kind of initial thinking. I had also thought it was very, very interesting it would be interesting to try to build a brand around a CryptoPunk. So part of my motivation, specifically around buying 4156, was I thought the ape looked cool. It looked like it had a bit of attitude with the blue bandana, and that it would be fun to create a kind of digital artist persona for the punk. I've been personally speculating in financial markets and doing things in financial markets for a long time now. And I find that typically there's no one, when one gets very, very bullish on an idea or an asset class, there's typically more than one reason to want to buy something. And I think I saw in punks, again, this kind of confluence of many different factors around digital identity and ownership, around digital originals, around punks being the first of their kind, like the originator of the form, and that could give them value. And then also potentially as an object that one could build a brand around, that would be something completely new and potentially very interesting for that reason.
Yeah, this concept of being able to build brands and kind of, we'll say, monetize the likeness or uniqueness of these different, we'll call them NFT collectibles or collections, right, has certainly gained a lot of prominence, especially in the last few months. And one project I know you're involved with, and we will bring this kind of back full circle to punks, because there is some interesting activity that's been happening there, especially with you specifically over the last few weeks, that I definitely want to get into. But taking a quick kind of sidestep here, one of the projects you're heavily involved in is Nouns, right? And I think that they're one of the most interesting, I won't say derivatives of the kind of punk world, but they're a very interesting kind of NFT collectible. And I would love to hear, one, from your own words, what is Nouns? What was kind of the origin story around Nouns themselves, and what makes them unique versus something like a CryptoPunk?
Yeah, sure. So Nouns started kind of in deep in my imagination. I had been thinking about punks and experimenting with punks and owning punks, and I had really started to think about how, if punks are the kind of originator of the form, I've called them elsewhere the kind of Citizen Kane of the form of PFP projects, collectibles, communities, however we want to define it. If they're the Citizen Kane, they really define the form. They did that in 2017, and over the previous 6 months, as punks had become popularized, we hadn't really seen a whole lot of innovation happen around the model. We'd seen a lot of kind of copycats, a lot of people taking what punks had done and kind of imitating it, but nobody had built punks 2.0 or really started to think about what that might be. And so I had spent a lot of time thinking about, well, what are the other primitives here that would be interesting, that could really extend this idea, and make it more than a kind of digital collectible, that could really make it a community that had capital, that had ownership, and that had an ability to kind of proliferate something larger, potentially make something that could become the world's largest open source brand. And so I wrote down a bunch of those ideas in a Twitter thread, and very fortunately, as a function of having a big presence on Twitter and having built in the technology world for a long time, I was able to meet a bunch of people that wanted to help build the idea together. And so a group of 10 of us got together, really based on a Twitter thread, and over a period of 3 months, kind of fleshed out some of the ideas that I put forth in the thread into the Nouns project.
Hey, if you like this clip, be sure to check out the full interview and more only on realvision.com/crypto. It's 100% free. Sign up now.